Hi guys, welcome back. We are reading Granite. This is part 2. My video only allows me to do a little bit at a time, so here goes part 2. One day on a short run, Susan saw Granite falter. She stopped the team and rushed to him. It was quickly clear to her something was wrong. Granite tried, but he could not get to his feet. Granite's temperature was soaring. His heart was racing, and he was fading fast. Granite needed help, but help was far away. She bundled him up, and they flew to a veterinary hospital. So where Susan Butcher lives in Fairbanks, Alaska, to get to the kind of veterinary hospital that she needed would have been about 4 or 5 hours on a drive or about 40 minutes or so by airplane. So that's why she flew him to the veterinarian. The doctor had little hope for his recovery. Susan set up a cot next to Granite and stayed with him day and night, petting him and willing him to live. Granite lived, but the veterinarian gently told Susan he would never race again. The illness had damaged his heart. So if you're making connections, by the way, this is the airplane, and this is Granite at the hospital, and Susan laying right next to him. If you're making connections, it's very similar to the kind of fever that Helen Keller had that caused her to go both blind and deaf. This was the same sort of thing, but it damaged his heart. When Granite was able, they flew back home. Susan and the dogs continued to train, while Granite rested in the cabin, watching the leaves turn colors and then slowly fall to the ground as fall turned into winter. Before the snow came, the dogs pulled Susan on a 4-wheeled cart so that they could get stronger. Granite cried and howled every time the team left him behind. He was determined to get better. So my question for you is, do you think a dog can make a decision to try and get better so he can go back to racing? I watch some of these dogs that are related to Granite, and I say, yes, they can. Slowly but surely, Granite showed improvement. The veterinarian told Susan Granite could start running loose with the little puppies. As winter came, Granite was back on the team, but he was only training with the young dogs on shorter runs. Meanwhile, the main racing team was running many long miles under the northern lights. Still, every night after Susan returned, Granite would sleep on her bed. Gradually, his strength returned. Now, what's interesting about that statement is sled dogs, if you remember I told you, they pretty much only stay outside. So him sleeping on her bed was a big deal for sled dogs. The doctor was amazed at his progress. As a test of his recovery, Susan let him run a short race with the young dogs. Granite proved he was healthy by leading that team to victory. His determination, drive, and strength convinced Susan he could race the Iditarod again. But had his endurance come back? Could he actually finish the 1,000-mile race? So the kind of races that Susan entered him in, I actually got a chance to watch 3 of them last weekend. And I have some video of that also that's really pretty cool. The Iditarod started in early March. Granite was at the starting line, leading Susan's team again. To win, they had to beat last year's champion. Day after day, the two teams raced, always close to each other. The trail turned out to be tough for Susan and her team. The sled broke, and many times they became lost. Near the end of the race, the two teams were only 17 seconds apart. Susan and Granite were ahead, but suddenly the other team passed them and pulled away. Susan thought, well, I guess second place is okay. Then she looked at the dogs working so hard and remembered her promise to them. This is our year to win, boys. She called out to Granite, and he responded. They charged by the other team. Again, they had a very small lead. Do you think they're going to win? I think so. As they left an Eskimo village 100 miles from the finish line in Nome, a furious storm hit. Susan often could not see the trail, but Granite kept on going. Finally, the snow was blowing across the ground so thick, Susan couldn't even see Granite at the front of her team. Granite had to find the trail on his own. From time to time, he would get lost, so Susan would lean into the wind and walk up to the front of the team to help him regain the trail. You know how we studied blizzards? It was beyond what we looked at for blizzards on our videos. As the storm raged, Susan's arms were becoming frozen. She could barely hang on to the sled. They had to get to the shelter soon. Granite saw that Susan needed his help. Finally, Susan couldn't move at all. Her arms were hurting so badly that she was beginning to lose hope. But Granite kept forging ahead. He knew Susan was in trouble, and it was up to him to get them through. The other dogs were following his lead. If he quit, they would too, and all would be lost. He kept going step after step, on through the blizzard. Susan was quiet and hunched over the sled. This was it. Look at the face. Suddenly, they saw dim lights from the next checkpoint. They had made it through the blizzard. Susan and the team rested there, eating hot meals throughout the stormy night. In the morning, they ran the last 76 miles to Nome and won the Iditarod. All of the other teams in the race had been turned back by the storm and did not finish until 18 hours later. Susan and Granite had done it. They had won the Iditarod and set a new record time. The next 2 years, they won again, with Granite proudly leading the team. With Susan's love and Granite's strength, they had become unstoppable. Now those same people who had not believed in them said, it's no wonder they win the race because she takes the best care of her dogs and they take care of her. But if you guys remember, they were saying Susan could never win because she babied her dogs. But in reality, those dogs gave it their all because they truly loved Susan. Here's the epilogue. That means the part that comes after the main part of the story. Granite won every race he entered at least once. In 1988, he became the only lead dog ever to win the Iditarod 3 times in a row. Granite retired from racing after Susan's 4th Iditarod victory. He traveled extensively with Susan and even went to the White House to visit the president. But his favorite place was always there in their cabin in the wilderness, where he watched the puppy teams head out on the trails for their own adventures. Granite lived to be 17 and a half years old and died in Susan's arms. Isn't that amazing? I love this story. And I actually got to see, this is a statue of him at the Susan Butcher Family Center, where they still train dogs today. Unfortunately, and this is Susan and her family on the back, unfortunately, not too long after winning those 4 Iditarods, Susan died of leukemia. So her family, her husband, and her 2 daughters continue her legacy, as do her friends and the people that worked for her. And I'll tell you more about that one next time.